So I'm April Taylor, and I want to share with you my personal testimony. God has been good to me my whole life. When I was a kid, I was born in New Orleans. Born in our house. Matter of fact, my mom was an unwed mom. We lived in a house that I would call a row. It was a shotgun house, just one room. You can see the front door through the back door. Not very much to start with. Um, my mom had moved there to live with her aunt and uncle, and she met my dad, and then when I was 7 she moved back to Georgia. So I was raised in Georgia, Albany, Georgia. Before I knew what a virgin was, I wasn't. Before I even kind of heard it in church or heard it talked about or whatever, things that happened, touched, inappropriately, things that kind of just happened with me and with my family that was just not okay. So when I became an adolescent, and I was always academically, I was always a good student, I was very smart. I used to get in fights and stuff at school, but it wasn't because I wanted to be in a fight. It was mostly because, for whatever reason, people always kind of started something. I would never let it go, so there was always, it was always something. As I grew up, I wound up being promiscuous and doing things that I shouldn't have done. I wound up getting pregnant at 17. My son's now 31, so I love my son and I don't regret that, but it changed the course of my life, because at that time I was at a program for kids who wanted to be doctors. I wanted to be a pediatrician when I was a youngster, and so that was my life dream, was to be a pediatrician. And I'm at this program at Clark College for people who want to be doctors. Find out I'm pregnant is that dream, and that's kind of a good thing, because I ended the dream because I didn't want to leave my son with anybody. I wanted to raise my son myself. I really felt like that was what I should do. So I made choices for the rest of my life that had been affected by that decision to be pregnant at a young age. Then I wound up going to college almost right away. Even before that, I wound up working at GMAC for a summer, which was a great thing for us because I wound up getting my first car. But God, when I look back, God has just blessed just my whole life. One of the things that happened in college is that I met my husband, Jerome. We were both in a lab, and we sat and I was asking for help with an assignment, and they told me Jerome could help, and I went to a guy and asked for help, and he said and I said the guy couldn't help me. So I told the other guy, he said, that's not Jerome. And so we laughed about, I didn't even know who he was at first. And then we became very good friends once we met each other. We hung out, we talked, we just became friends. He's very quiet. Most people know him to be very, very quiet, so they don't know how we talk. They figure out how to talk to him. But actually from the very beginning, we talked to each other. We've always talked, and we've always been friends from day one, which is kind of amazing. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So we were friends for about 6 months, engaged in February, and then married in June. It just went really fast. And so I was married at age 23. By that time, we had the one son that I already had. And then after that, for about the first 3 years, everything was kind of a whirlwind. Things went pretty well. I was working a lot. We were really busy. He was working a lot. The kid, we had moved to Tallahassee. It was just a very fast-paced life right then. We had bought a house and a car and all that by that time, and we were probably 25 at the time. So after that first 3 years, we had probably our first argument. With one argument, I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm getting my stuff, my kid, and I'm calling it. And I went back to my mom's. It turns out for the weekend, but in my estimation, I thought it was for good. When I went home that weekend, I totaled my car and wrapped it around the telephone pole. I had a scratch on my head, and with that scratch, the ambulance was there, and they were like, do you want to call they sent me to the hospital. Then they asked if I wanted my mom, and I had been married 3 years, and I started to cry because I didn't want my mom. I wanted my husband because I was married, so I wanted my husband. So I had to call his mom, who lives in another town, to see if she knew where her son was, to which I had to say, I don't want to explain anything, just if you see him, tell him to call me. And he called, and we talked. The fight was because I wanted to party and I wanted to drink because that's what I had done before I met him. I went to the club, stayed out, partied, just partied like a rock star, I would probably say, and then went home. I just enjoyed dancing. That was the big thing, was just dancing. So we had a conversation. We agreed that I wouldn't party because he really wasn't a party. Never drink, never smoke, never cuss, still not to this day. So that wasn't his scene. But we agreed that I would drink, but not in front of the kids. So mind you, I just had the one kid, but we didn't drink in front of him. After that, one of the jokes I used to have for him when we first got together is I didn't want to have more kids unless he knew we would be married forever. If he wasn't sure it was going to be forever, then I didn't want any more kids. So once we had this fight and we got back together, like I said, it was just a weekend. But after that, we decided to have kids, and so we had a son, and then right after that, we had a daughter. And so they were 16 months apart, so it was just back-to-back kids. Once that happened, we moved to Chattanooga, so that's how we kind of wound up here. We wound up being recruited by a company, and we worked in the electronics field, and we kind of came here, and by now we have 3 kids. So fast forward about 5 or 6 years, and we have a family crisis. Some stuff happens, and it kind of sets me back for a loop. I'm depressed. I'm sad. This stuff is going on with our marriage. I'm just really upset. So the young lady, by this time, this young lady had been inviting me to church. I had joined the church. We didn't even join the church. We had started going to church. And then she had just started sharing with me, and she shared this book called Me Obey Him. When I read the book, it was amazing. I read it cover to cover in a day. I told my husband I would do it. We felt a blessing. We both felt something happen in our marriage. And so then I started to practice. And when I started to practice, it took at least 6 months for me to see the results. And I would just say, okay, God, this isn't fair. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not seeing it. I'm not understanding why. This really doesn't make sense why. I'm not seeing the results. But I kept praying to God. I wouldn't take it to my husband. I just kept taking it to God. And really just doing what I was supposed to do and letting God do what only God could do. And He did. And so eventually things turned around. And it was an amazing turnaround. And when that turnaround happened, it was one of the things that it just amazed me. So for the first 10 years of our marriage, it was kind of rocky. Things like I was bored, or I just wasn't happy. Probably not happy in myself, or certainly not happy in the marriage. And the last 15 have been amazing. God has just blessed our marriage, blessed our family, blessed our kids, blessed our grandkids. Just blessed everything. He's just turned everything around. And so I laugh and say, the first 2 years were rocking. The last 15 have been the best I've ever seen. I ask him if he's, as happy as I am, or is it just my imagination? And he agrees that it's a good thing, and then we're both, loving it. And so God He's turned things around, like our sex life, intimacy. He's turned around the way we look at things, the way we look at each other. Just everything. And so that's why I try to share with other people, because I want other people to know what kind of life they can have if they truly give it to God and trust God with what's going on.